Hi everyone, welcome to the CT-Ohh podcast. Tonight we'll be having one of our Ask the Expert sessions. In these sessions we'll be talking to an expert in a specific field who's not necessarily a CTO, but has expert advice that is relevant to us as CTOs. Tonight I'll be talking to Mark Hamill, who's a product expert. Mark will be talking to us about what product is, what product isn't, give us some advice on finding out more about product, and talking about how it's relevant to us as CTOs. Before we get started with Mark, can I ask if you're interested in keeping up to date, that you hit the subscribe button and we'll keep you up to date with any new podcasts that come out. But please also give us your feedback online. We'd love to hear more about what you think. And it really does help us kind of shape the program going forward. So it's fantastic. But without further ado, let me introduce Mark Hamill. So thanks for joining us, Mark. I'm delighted to have you on the podcast. Do you want to give us a bit of intro to yourself, your role, your background, and what you do?
Yes, definitely. Thanks very much for having me on. So my name is Mark, not that Mark Hamill, just in case anyone gets disappointed. Cue all the Star Wars jokes now. But so I'm a VP of product at Outthink. It's a security awareness training platform, small kind of startup scale-up type thing. And I have been doing product management for, I guess, as long as I can remember. That's bad, isn't it, when you don't remember what you did before? But it's doing product management now, I think, going on 15 years. And I've been in cybersecurity for about 10 of those. It's the only industry I've ever stayed in. But I guess my background wasn't originally, it wasn't product management. I started out, I did software computer science. I almost said software engineering. That would have been a big faux pas. I did computer science at Queen's, and I found out that I wasn't good at Java. I really am not meant to. I was never destined to be a production coder, but I was always quite good at scripting, and I was quite good at organizing and things like that. I got quite good at Perl. I got quite good at Bash, things like that as well. And I ended up like drifting into automation. I think it's just I like things to be organized, just my personality wise. And from automation, I got into a little bit more kind of project management and things like that. And in a company I was in, they had just started to use Agile. And I thought, oh, that sounds quite cool. I wonder, could I do that? It didn't work out in that company, but my next hop was over into a product owner role. And I went from product owner to product manager. And now I'm kind of running teams of product managers and designers and content producers and things like that. So it's been a fun ride.
Fascinating. That's cool. It's quite a journey from software development. I've met loads of people who started off in computing science, and usually they go the other way. They go into QA and testing. They realize they don't want to do the coding, so they kind of want to break it. But that's cool.
I did have a little spell in QA as well. Not so much QA.
Okay.
When I was at Sun Microsystems, again, it was the same kind of thing. I met people because they heard the name, and there was a lot of Star Wars jokes. But I was quite good at testing and breaking things, and that's when I started automation, because I think I was too lazy to test everything by hand, so I started trying to automate all of these tests. So testing was a jumping off point for me as well. But I enjoyed the automation part of it more than the actual hands-on testing, I think.
Cool. Okay. Tell me about product then. What is product? What isn't product? I've met loads of people over the years, and I'm sure, the CTOs or prospective CTOs that are hopefully listening to the podcast are keen to know more about is, they've probably met the same people as well who have a slightly different take on what product is and what's important. From your point of view, what is it and what isn't it?
So what it is, if I was to really, really dumb it down and sum it up in as few words as possible, I would say that product management is trying to do the right thing for the right people at the right time.
Okay.
So the right thing is building features that matter, that align to the strategy that customers want in enough scale that you're delivering impact, not just one customer out of 1,000 asking for one feature. So, and then building the right time again. That's product management is like this constant battle of priorities, and everybody's priorities are kind of shoved into one melting pot, and you're trying to figure out what is the right time for something to make it into a product. And then again, for the right people, now it depends what your objectives are. So as a company, if you're trying to scale really, really fast, then you're trying to acquire loads of customers. So you build lots of features that demo well, that solve a problem. If you've got a massive customer base and you're trying to keep them all happy, then you're trying to like chip away at the friction that they have in the product, and the things that bug them and the things that they wanted to get incrementally better at. So building the right things for the right people. I mean, in my experience, product management, when I started, it was very much like project management. There was very little delineation between the two, and I don't think people
Mm.
really got. And a project manager is someone who's trying to get task-based completions, and they're trying to map out something in the future that looks like a bit of forecasting or a bit of predictability. So you know how long a task is going to take, you know how many dependencies you have, and you know who you need to do that task. And I think product management, originally it got confused with it, maybe not so much now, but product, you're trying to take the inputs that you get from stakeholders, and by inputs I mean what the customer wants, what the sales team need because they've got a competitor that they can't win against because they're missing something, or something they heard at a trade show, and what the marketing team wants to talk about, what the company strategy is. Like there's so many of those inputs that you have to factor in,
Mhm.
and you're looking at competitors, you're looking at customers, you're looking at what the market is doing. Let's say some of what the analysts are have got in mind. I realize I'm not doing a great job of boiling this down, even though I said I was going to. But you have umpteen of these inputs, and then once you have a good idea that you have the capability to execute on that fits within your strategy, then you think to yourself, right, I'm going to bet on this and I'm going to make this part of the roadmap.
Okay.
Then you go into this loop of discovery. So you take an idea and you want to talk to the engineering team and find out what's feasible, talk to the design team to see what way it's going to be presented to a user. Then you want to get some validation from customers and say, okay, what do you think? This was a problem you told me about. Is this going to solve your problem? And then
Mhm.
you get it into this kind of production loop where you're trying to design it properly, you're trying to build it and iterate on it and stuff like that.
Okay.
And then the roadmap is a collection of all of those things that you want to build. And the further out you go, the less likely that it's going to be the same when you get there.
Okay.
That
Cool. So
I have
really,
done. I have done better with explanations of product management. That was it. That was a bit of a
no, it was
rant.
good. It was good. I guess what I'm hearing from that is it's about ensuring you're not just delivering something; it's delivering value to the business and ensuring there's value in what's being produced by the developers team, not just that, not or the business as such. Not just kind of getting something out the door for the sake of it.
Hmm. And I think you're trying to do a lot of collaborative understanding. You need to understand what the sales team want, what the marketing
Mm.
team want, what the engineering team want, what the exec team want, based into the built baked into the strategy. And those, it's a really unique spot, product management, because you get integrated with so many different teams and you learn so much about it. My
Yeah.
first product management gig, like, was probably my first time on site. It was probably my first time realizing like the sway a big customer has over a small company, and you really start to understand how the other departments work. It's quite a privileged position to be in. There's it's a real steep learning curve, but it's really powerful whenever you sort of get the seat at the table. Um, and like you say, it's about adding value, not just building the next big ticket item. And
Yeah.
that's the bit that I think modern product management has really done a great job in, is that fast feedback loop. How quickly can I either show an idea to a customer or a wireframe, or build something small and then put it out there to alpha test, beta test, closed group, whatever, and then get some feedback as well. I think that's a big change, from what I guess traditional software. Maybe traditional software is before my time, but that whole waterfall model where you're building for bespoke, massive
Yeah.
client, build for 2 years, and then hopefully it's right. So.
Cool. So you mentioned there that at the start it was kind of quite muddled with project management. Is there anything else that people get confused about and that product really isn't? Is there anything you as a product expert want to tell us, stop, it is not this, um, to make it for once and for all?
I think it depends on the company and the environment. I've worked places where there wasn't a very strong design element, and product
Yeah.
managers are then designers. Can you give me the mock up of this? Can you give me the wireframe of this? And I'm like, well, I can, but it won't be great. Like I'm not a born designer either.
Yeah.
And I think again. So some of these interviews now they're talking about product managers needing to combine with other roles. So I think was it the Airbnb CEO, and he said that he combined the product management role with product marketing. But
Right.
it was quite a controversial interview. It was one of these ones that caused a few waves on like all the posts on LinkedIn. But I think that what I took away from that podcast was that product marketing is like the external view. Like you have to not just understand what you're building, you have to understand what non-customers are asking for, like
Okay.
what's going on in the market that can influence your decisions too. And that, I think, product marketing is another discipline that's a bit separate.
Hmm.
But again, it depends on the environment. So in a small shop, like four developers and one product person, you might be the designer, you might be helping doing wireframing, you might have a really good front end person there that's kind of partnering up and they do the design. So the I would say what's some of the biggest confusion to me comes in terms of the particular environment and the subtleties with who does what role. Because product management is like there's you could say it's not a role in of itself. And there you have product owners, you have backlog managers, you have scrum masters and all these kind of roles. And in a small shop, a product manager might be all of those things. And in a
Hmm.
big organization, they might be none of those things. It's Yeah, it's a tricky question. Like
Complicated.
what else have people got wrong about product management over the year? Um, I don't know.
It's interesting though. It is, 'cause, I've seen it kind of evolve over time, and from that kind of project management space, and then there are always those assumptions of, so you're going to write the stories then, so you're going to do the UI UX for us then, that kind of thing, and it's so far off piece that it's unreal. And as the role evolves more and more, it's kind of almost dragging that baggage behind it still occasionally, and people kind of go, oh yeah, you doing this, you doing that, and you're right, it's about who does what roles and all that kind of stuff. um, so are there any kind of common pitfalls, or there, working in kind of businesses that you've worked in, are there any kind of gotchas or pitfalls that you see quite commonly that you can kind of call out and kind of advise us about?
So I mean, there's pardon me, one really big one I would say is about this like customer contact, and it was a product manager that doesn't have like a really frequent and really hands-on feedback loop with customers. They're going to be building in the dark. And I worked in an organization that was very sales-led, and sales-led is fine with certain types of organizations. The sales people are the SMEs, and they're coming in and building the requirements. But what you get there is this disconnect between the salesperson and the engineering teams, and the product is the liaison in the middle. And a sales team could come back and say, well, I need this dashboard and I need it in 6 months. And the engineering team say, well, to build that, I think it's going to take 12 months. And you get into this weird place.
Hmm.
And in a sales led loop, sometimes those priorities shift very, very fast, faster than the delivery time would have been for the thing you're trying to deliver. So I think that's a real thing. And I've worked a couple of places that I think would have been dramatically better had we had more contact with customers. So that product person, you hear this term, the CEO of the product, and I don't really like that term. I don't think it really applies. And a product person doesn't have much authority. They try to influence without that authority. And the way they do that is by trying again to know what all the stakeholders, what their priorities are, even what their motivations are,
Hmm.
and the being the voice of the customer. So I think that's a really big one. So a common pitfall would be trying to represent the customer without knowing them all that well. And that you remedy that by every time you get a customer contact, every time you have an opportunity to do a roadmap call, you spend 20 minutes in the roadmap, and then you kind of at the end you throw in a few questions. So what don't you like about the product, or what's not working for you? Or if you had a magic wand, what would you add to the product?
Hmm.
And that kind of interaction with the customers, that's what gives you that credibility with the engineering team that you're trying to pitch a feature to, with the salesperson that you're saying, look, I know you want this feature, but I'm going to deliver this other thing first because I think it has more impact, and here's why. And it's all in negotiation too. So I would think that kind of contact with a customer, without that, it becomes very difficult to do a product job. So if you're ever
Hmm.
interviewing and you talk to the team, the hiring manager, and all the rest of it, and you say, how many times do you talk to the customers? And they say, oh, well, we have a cab and they get together once a year, but that's about it. That would be something for me you'd either want to come in and fix, or you'd want to probe a little bit more to see how they get their feedback. Because some people might do it in product too. If you've got Facebook PMs probably don't talk to end users, but they probably have data from tens of thousands of users every single minute flying through the system that tells you what people are doing. So I would say
Yeah.
that the customer contact would be a big one. The other thing is the flip side of that, this kind of influence without authority. For folks that get into product because they want to run the show, they're either kidding themselves or they're in a dysfunctional environment. And I know some examples of people that got into product because they wanted to run the whole show, and then you get in, and then you realize you're like, wow, everyone just shouts at you all the time, and you're like, I know this is what product is. So that's another really common pitfall, is to assume that product managers run the show because they are so integrated to all these teams. They're not. They might be a center, the central hub in the wheel with all the spokes connected in, but they're not necessarily in the driving seat, and they might be in the organization. The product manager might have a whole lot of autonomy and authority, but
Mm-hmm.
by and large, it's a role of like knowing a whole lot of things, knowing how to turn those things into an idea that becomes a story, that becomes a feature, and knowing how to collaborate with a whole lot of teams. It's a bit of a soft skills role. I think I learned that too late as well. That's
Okay.
without a whole lot of soft skills, or willingness to go and develop those soft skills more than you do, so maybe more than the other skills you're trying to add to um, your war chest. It can be tricky if you're not a people person.
Okay. So, I mean, well, it sounds like, where it's in the past, I've heard it being described as the glue that holds the departments together. It's actually more like the greasing of the wheels of stakeholders rather than controlling them. It's about that kind of getting them moving and collaborating to drive it forward. Is that fair?
Yeah, I'd say that's fair. I mean, you find yourself trying to unstick a whole lot of problems, and I know Scrum Masters are in that mix as well. That they're trying to do,
Mm.
a similar thing. That they're like constant forward progress. You don't get into a meeting with an idea of like what you want out of that meeting and what actions you're going to take away from it. And I think that mindset for a product manager is quite healthy as well. And just when you say about the intersection, I think the PMs that I'd be most impressed with in my career are the ones that don't take anything personally, they don't get stressed, and a decision's a decision. It doesn't matter who made it. That kind of lack of ego. That just when you say greasing the wheels, like that's how you grease the wheels, is just by being that kind of team player. I mean, what in your experience, like when you're working with PMs, what do you see as like the defining characteristic with the PM you want to go back to and work with again?
The ones that I've always kind of seen as being really great are the ones who are slightly subject matter experts on the product as a whole and have that kind of that view set that they want to deliver value and not the value of, it's a very, very difficult balance. Not the value of, designer value of this must look like perfection or anything like that. It's about some kind of, how can I put it, some kind of, tangible middle ground, some kind of pragmatic view of producing value in the long run to the business.
I think it's probably the same for any role in any discipline. If you're willing to muck in and learn something before you have to ask someone a question, same for like SQL queries. Like I can't do table joins or anything even remotely sophisticated. I can't do anything like that. But if I know that there's a table and I can do like a select from, like a really really basic query, and
Yep.
that might take me 20 minutes or 30 minutes to go on Google and piece all together all the formatting that I need because I don't know it off the top of my head. But I
Yeah.
think doing that, it shows people that you're willing to put the effort in before you ask the question and take 2 minutes away from them, because people talk a lot now about the cost of a distraction. A distraction is the 2 minutes for the question and the 20 minutes to go back into your train of thought afterwards, something like that.
Exactly.
And I just think that if you are willing to learn and you're willing to, and if someone doesn't have to explain something to you every time in basic concepts,
Mm.
that's it takes you a long way when you can speak the same language as folks.
Definitely understood. So, where do you see success then? How do you measure the success of your role? I mean, we talked there about you know providing value to the business and balancing up the needs and requirements of different parts of the business. But what's your how do you do KPIs? How do you measure success?
It's it's the it's one of the most challenging things. Every time you do like quarterly OKRs is sort of the standard that I've been in for the last couple of roles. And every quarter you do it, you realize how much the last one sucked and how you wish it was different and how wish you were moving on. But the I guess the way I look at it and the way I've been speaking to teams that I've working with for the last little while is that there's three levels to it. One is output based. So it's I delivered X by Y. And that's
Mm.
it's okay. Sometimes that's the way to measure things. And then somewhere in the middle you have this adoption metric, which is I got X amount of users to touch this feature and within a certain amount of time. And then the last one is the outcome. So the outcome is to save someone time or to like what is it, increase throughput, something whatever that happens to be. And that's usually the hardest thing to measure. But once you've got to that level, when you can define it, it all of a sudden it becomes a little bit easier. And the joy in that too, and this is something it's I wish it had struck me earlier in my career. When you're outcome focused, you can take different options and teams. If they're empowered teams, now not all organizations let their teams like run wild and do what they want to do. But if you have an
Mhm.
outcome in mind that says reduce friction in this flow by 20%, and you have a really good way of reducing friction, maybe it's time, and you say for a user to get from point A to point D, it takes 1 week, 2 weeks, whatever it happens to be. You say I want to reduce that by 50%. You're not giving the team an instruction to say go build feature X or go build feature Y. You're giving the team an instruction to say go shave 50% off this workflow or this thing. And they get a little bit of freedom to go and do that because the outcome is the same. You know what you want to do for your users. So I think
Mhm.
that is one that's I'm still struggling with to this day because not everything can be measured in an outcome. Some things are intangible. If users
Yeah.
tell you that it look like the look and feel of a dashboard, that you can make it look better, but how do you measure their satisfaction? You can survey all that kind of stuff, but it's a bit, I don't know. um the way I'm trying to approach it at the minute is you you figure out what your highest level objectives are. So I like things that fit into themes neatly into buckets or pillars or whatever you call them, and then you
Yeah.
decide the top problems to solve for your users in those themes, and then you end up trying to like influence the top problems to solve there. I mean, we had we had an issue once about oh, what was this one? We had data moving in and out of a system that we had external people that were running tests and then shoving data into our system. And the idea was to reduce friction in that flow. So it took them less time to get the data from the tool that they were using over here into our platform. And we said, I know, we'll build this big integration. We'll pull the integration inside and we'll host it ourselves and they'll press a button and it'll work this way. And that'll get them in there. We did it. We spent more time than we should have, and they got in and they were like, "Yeah, in our system we can configure it. We know where the logs go. We've got all these personalizations. I use it from command line. Yada yada yada. In your system, it's like only got a few options. I can't run it the way I want to, so I'm not going to touch it." And what we should have built was better copy and paste. Like literally,
Okay.
that's what we should have built. Not integrations, not like pulling this platform and hosting it ourselves, not all these sophisticated workflows. Literally, we should have built better copy and paste. And if we were outcome focused there, that said, make this professional over here, make his life easier getting data from
Mm.
this system into this system. Like your mind has to work that way. And I think that's the bit that I can't claim that I do this for everything because sometimes it's not possible to do it. But that's sort of where you start. So you start trying to be outcome focused, and
Mhm.
that's how you measure value because you see how you've changed the user behavior, you've made their life better, you saved them time, you increased their output, something like that. And if you can't do that, you go for adoption. I think Google has this big thing now about recurring adoption. That's a lot of they say that you're you can solve a problem and everybody clicks on it and then the usage kind of dips straight away. But recurring usage means you've solved a problem and they keep coming back to you because they like how you've solved that problem. So recurring adoption is another way. So if you build something that people continue to click on, that probably means you've done something right. And then the
Mhm.
last one, that I delivered it on time, like we said we would. And sometimes that feature, it's not solving a customer problem. Like a sales team might come to you and say, I don't have a way to demo the platform. Can you bake something in so the demo is better? And then your outcome is probably less tangible because it's a sales target that they want to
Yeah.
win more deals.
Yeah.
But how do you know how much of that you've influenced? So in that regard, you had a feature, you knew how big it was and you delivered it on time. I would say that's kind of like the third level down in that one.
And how do you handle? Do you ever get kind of asked questions around, or asked to kind of build, or build up, but kind of spearhead up the development of non-functional things that you mentioned there, stuff that maybe isn't user used but is going to help the sales team, but what about kind of non-functional things like this system has to run faster, or just something that's not reliant on that kind of user interaction, and how do you approach that?
Yeah, I mean it's something that I think it's been part of every company I've worked at, that there's always this work. And traditionally I would say, maybe you challenge me on this one, but usually that's the hardest thing to get prioritized, especially,
Mm.
pardon me, if you're under lots of sales pressure, if you've got, kind of execs coming in saying, features, keep building, worry about tech debt later. And at different companies, it depends on the leadership you have in those teams as well. So what you have to do in that scenario, you probably have to concede that you don't really understand. Well, no, that's not fair. If I didn't understand the technology, what was being asked, like if you came to me and said, we want to use like this different technology, or you wanted to switch from AWS to GCP because it would give us X. And this used to happen a lot in one of the companies I worked in Belfast, that I had no idea like what the tech was, but we were working with people who just, they knew how to run these things. Sooner or later someone's going to ask me a story, or to ask me to tell me a story why we built that feature, why we spent 3 months on this, and I don't see anything. It's totally invisible, totally intangible. And a lot of them in one of the companies I was in Belfast, a lot of the joys of that was that they were done for cost saving reasons or performance reasons. So we moved to spot pricing at one point, and we saved 100K a month or something like that, and that was like, that was a really big deal. So that was really easy to tell the story on. But other times it's not quite so straightforward. And one way I've seen it work really successfully is you carve out time in every sprint or in every month or whatever your kind of unit is. And you say 30% of everything is going to be refactoring tech debt, consolidation, or whatever optimizations we want to build in that month. So that to me removed a lot of that contention, because you've got sort of two priority stacks. You've got top priority feature level, and then you've got top priority in the tech level. That I've seen it work really, really well. Yeah, there's a little bit of argy-bargy around what goes into that 30%. Is it the bugs count, or are bugs in the feature bucket, this kind of thing? But generally, that to me means you're almost guaranteeing some investments and some priority for that tech work, even if I don't
Mm.
necessarily have to sell to anybody. But
Yeah.
without doing that, I think what usually happens is, as part of that kind of sprint negotiations, or as part of your quarterly OKR planning, there'll be a conversation from somebody like my counterpart's CTO, and he would say to me, well, this has to happen, otherwise this falls apart. Now, I might have to defend that, but because we're peers, he can defend it as well. He's in the same meetings I am about planning those OKRs. So I think it's about, just to sum it up, like being clear on the value, even if it's intangible, um, being able to set it as a priority, and then if you can't set it as a priority, carve out time for those where you don't have to negotiate the priority against a feature work, that it's always a consistent priority.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Interesting. All right. Obviously, this is a CTO podcast, and you said there your counterpart is a CTO. How can how do you work best with CTOs in your experience, and what could make it better? How can we be better for you guys?
That's a great question. I have to wonder, might he watch this before I answer the question? I think that in my experience, the some of the engineers that I maybe it's not fair to say I enjoyed working with most. I think I had the most common ground with were that kind of where they had that kind of customer appreciation. And
Mm.
not everybody wants that. Not everybody wants to think about customers. Some people want a detailed piece of work, and they want a spec, and they want to work on that. And I even had engineers that I work with in my career, not in the current role or even the previous, but they wanted to work on non-customer facing features. They wanted to be doing things that had no like customer interaction. It was all about infrastructure and kind of throughput. Even work with a guy that was about, what was this? he worked on high or really really low latency systems for trading platforms, and that was his thing. He just loved the speed at which he could make things work and optimize that way. So that was a really
Wow.
interesting niche actually. But when I've been working with some, like, especially very senior engineers, the ones that have that customer appreciation, that comes in really handy because they're thinking about, and I think at the CTO level, like, you're a very senior stakeholder in that business. Like, the revenue model, like what the
Mm.
sales people are working on. You're probably sitting in there like high level OKR planning as well. So I
Yeah.
think that part of it is really, it can be really powerful. And I guess the other part of it is keeping product in check. Every now and again, when you come up with a big feature and someone says, "Yeah, that's great and all, but this is how much it'll cost us to actually deliver that." Maybe that's a bigger deal now when somebody comes in and goes, "Yeah, I think we should add an AI chatbot," and somebody was like, "You know how much those things cost to run?" I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. There's yeah, there's always strange ones like that. Always people asking for the latest thing. I had a chat a few weeks ago with somebody who was working on blockchain, and I remember in the past, oh, let's build that into a blockchain. Why? How? What's the point? So I understand where you're coming from, but okay, cool. So that user customer appreciation, I guess, it's something I think CTOs can kind of forget about. We kind of, although we are very close and typically on the boards, or have that kind of earshot of what's going on in sales and what's going on in customer service. We can, especially in technical teams, the teams can become entrenched. And they get stuck in the detail, they get lost in the technology. So it's good insight to kind of understand more about the customer and about the users. Cool. Okay.
So tell
Um,
me this: whenever you said there about like a tech debt and trying to like find ways to get that prioritized. So what happens if in your world, if there's something, and maybe not tech debt, but something that has to happen to keep the platform alive, some kind of like massive upgrade that there's just no real way to talk to like senior leadership about why you need 6 months of some of your top resources to build out? Like, how do you approach that with the product team?
the way that usually manifests is, and the way that I usually kind of communicate it is, I work closely with my product team to understand the roadmap, to understand what's important, and my voice in the business is usually used very sparingly. Um, so typically, I would try to, and I'd want to encourage the product team to be the voice of product, and not me to be a kind of echo chamber of, well, an echo of them and what they're saying. So, for me, it's very important that product people, as I said before, they understand the domain, they understand the stakeholders, they can make the cases themselves. If somebody's not listening and there's something critical, like, maybe the payment provider's changing their kind of mechanisms and we need to update it before the end of the year, um, that's when my voice comes in and it becomes more of a authoritative kind of, no, guys, this has to happen, and here's why. Because if we lose this, then we lose that, and then that reflects in revenue and bottom line, and it becomes a bit more of a heavy conversation. So it needs more weight behind it, and that's where I get in. But you can't obviously do that for everything, so that has to happen for the things that it really needs it, and that's a bit of an art as well of knowing what's important enough to use that voice to get something through that normally would cause just pushback.
And in some cases, that's helpful too. I think when you understand something is a non-negotiable, and this is why,
Yeah,
then you end up, it's not that you need to be convinced anymore, but there's no, when you understand you're not in a negotiation is what I mean, then you
yeah,
you can say, okay, let's plan for this, let's make it happen, let's fit it in around everything else. It's trickier when
yeah,
you're, I think one of the things that people don't realize with product people is that you do make commitments, and those commitments get influenced by external factors. And
mm,
sometimes you say you're going to deliver something and then you don't, or you can't, or you decide not to. There's reasons sometimes you can pivot away from a feature too. And I think that's when you realize, and you've got 6 months or 9 months, and you say, right, this is a non-negotiable, this is happening, let's plan for it. We don't have to worry about the wire anymore. That's just, it's done. It's a decision, not a discussion. But I think that's sometimes when it gets sticky with product, when something like that comes from left field, and then you realize, wow, I have to unmake those commitments I told these people over here that they were getting. That becomes challenging because they're not focused on the story about what you're doing and why. They're focused
Mm.
on the story about what you're not doing that you said you would.
Um, so, any advice on where someone like me, a CTO who's, not product savvy or up to speed on where product is, that we could start books? Any advice? Any people you think we should follow?
So that's like my kind of one of my go-tos. So
Okay,
Continuous Discovery Habits by Teresa Torres.
brilliant.
That to me is it's like it's not so much the whole discipline of product management, but it's how you turn an idea into a customer validated feature, that you run it through all these channels, that you break it down into small chunks, that you talk to people, that you understand you're building the right thing. And it's quite a short book as well. It's like 200 something pages. It's that to me, I would say it's one of the most influential product books that I've read. And
Mhm.
it just is one of these and Teresa Torres, she posts content on LinkedIn as well. She is one of these people that breaks it down and simplifies it, and I think does a really good job. I guess Marty Kagan's in the news at the minute because he's just released his third book. He kind of went up levels and levels, and now he's talking about transforming organizations into like being like I think the third one is called Transformed, is it? But it's quite topical because he says that there shouldn't be POs, they should be PMs, or they should be empowered, and they should be this, and product operations people don't really need to exist, and these kinds of things. And these are people with jobs right now that probably don't appreciate being told that their job's not worth doing like that.
Yeah.
And you could say that people make waves when they're trying to sell books. Maybe that's part of it as well. But like the first book, so his first book, well, I put it down on the shelf here as well somewhere. So there's Inspired, Empowered, and Transformed. And they're I would say they're worthy books. Again, they talk. It's a bit more about culture, and I think they don't talk enough about the kind of product culture and how product touches the other roles. And I think that's quite important to understand. That's quite a good one.
Well, thank you. Appreciate that. I love, I've said this before on the podcast. I love it when people have physical books. I'm a big fan of keeping physical books, especially coding books. Got stacks of them around the place that I'm working through, and a pile that I need to work through. So it's always good to see kind of physical books. So it's
Something
good
nice about
stuff.
it. Even pen and paper. I'm quite a note taker. I like pen and paper, and yeah.
Cool. All righty. Mark, really appreciate your time. It's been great talking to you. Really informative as well. Really informative. What's up next for you? What's the future look like for you and product?
Well, it's because I've just joined this company now, so it's all a bit manic. But it's trying to get new systems in place, so that's it's a challenge, but it's an interesting one as well. And beyond that, I mean, like it's it's hard to. I think it's hard sometimes to escape that kind of like the just the bubble that you're in at any one time. And
Hmm.
I don't find myself like going too far. Like with product management, I think you're just in this endless cycle of learning. And again, like I chatted about early on in the conversation, just about environments. Like product in one environment is totally different from product in another. And some of the different the ways, like I've been in B2B for a long time. Maybe I need to take a little venture out into B2C, something like that. But realistically, it's a tricky one. I see myself. It's one of these things. I don't know what else I can do anymore. I think I'm so far ingrained in product management that I would forget how to do some other things. But yeah,
CPO, Chief Product Officer. That's what you want.
yeah, maybe. I mean, I think
Be
I
a
still
founder.
founder would be interesting. I don't know. Like I don't know if people do it to put you off or if people do it because it really is hard. But like I've seen a few posts recently, and they were saying like if I had known, was it Jensen Huang said about Nvidia, and he said if I had known what it would take to be a founder, I would have said no early on and went and got a job. But I don't know. I think um, I like what I do now. I like some of the chaos. I'm
Hmm.
looking forward to the role I'm in now, starting to mature and starting to grow and scale. Um, and I think the people side of it is one of the reasons why I enjoyed like moving up, because I guess product you can kind of go like same as every other role, you can go like really senior IC or you can start to manage people, and the
Yeah.
people part of it and seeing people around you like struggle with something, then you help them, or you even supporting people with like when they're going through a rough time in work or when they're struggling with something. like that part of it, I think really it's part of the role I really like. So while the product thing, the experience I've grown there, I kind of joke about this, and maybe I shouldn't say this out loud, but sometimes I joke and say that I think I'm a better people person than I'm a product person. But I genuinely believe that like product is about knowing how to work with people, how to collaborate, how to pick them up and dust themselves off whenever things have gone wrong, and how to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
And like if I can get the role I'm in now to be truly iterative, to do like customer folk, we're still quite a small shop, we're growing fast, but when you get like a nice number of customers, when you can start to A/B testing, when you can start to beta test, alpha test, all these fun things, like that would be something that would really drive me as well.
Mm-hmm.
And as I guess I want to stay on this kind of people track too, because I genuinely like seeing some of the skills that I've acquired over the years and saying to people here, seriously, like don't make the same mistakes I did. Do this a slightly better way from the get go. And especially now when people they're coming out of university with product aspirations. When I was in that kind of territory, there really weren't product roles like that. You went and you worked for 10 years and then maybe you got a product role. And now people are coming out younger um, and like a bit more disciplined to how they approach it, because it's so much more of an established role. So it's nice that way, because you get to. I work with product. There's a product person on my team who's amazing with data, and like I'm learning data from him, and that's the thing that also like product is sort of this never-ending learning cycle. You said about a CTO not knowing everything about everything. I think product-wise, there's so many different places, and and folks with that kind of connected position you have in the company, because you get to learn from marketing people and salespeople and developers and other product people around you as well. I think it's quite a privilege to be in
Yep.
that role and get that much connection.
Business sponge. That's what it is.
Yeah, something like that.
Cool. Well, look, thanks very much. Really appreciate your time. Really, honestly, your passion and your kind of it's inspiring. You're really passionate about it and the way you talk about it. So thanks very much. I'm sure our viewers will really kind of appreciate your insights.